Something felt wrong about that place before we even got out of the car. I didn't admit it at the time, but my body noticed before my mind did. It started with the village. We had to drive through it to reach the forest. There was no other road, just a narrow strip of cracked asphalt winding between leaning wooden houses that looked like they had slowly sunk into the earth over decades. Nothing moved. No people. No dogs. No sound of doors, or tools, or voices. Just buildings watching the road. The houses stood too close together, their windows dark and dull like blind eyes reflecting the gray sky. Curtains hung motionless behind dusty glass. Some doors were slightly open, just enough to show darkness inside, but not enough to reveal anything real. The place didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused, like something had interrupted life mid-motion, and whatever caused it never left. "Dude, this place looks straight out of a horror movie," Daniel muttered from the passenger seat. I forced a small laugh. "You say that about anywhere without Wi-Fi." He didn't laugh back. He was staring at a house we were passing. The front door hung open a few inches, unmoving, like it had been left that way on purpose. A sheet of loose metal somewhere down the road shifted in the wind, scraping slowly, dragging across wood with a long, tired shriek. I pressed the gas a little harder. At the far edge of the village, we saw the only person. An old woman stood beside a crooked wooden fence. She didn't wave. She didn't react to the engine, or the gravel, or the headlights sliding over her face. She just watched us, completely still. Her eyes followed the car, turning slowly, steadily, tracking us until the road curved and the trees swallowed the village behind us. Neither of us spoke after that. The forest began suddenly. One moment, broken houses and sagging fences. The next, trees. Only trees. Tall, bare, stretched upward like thin black bones against the pale sky. It was late autumn, and the ground was buried under thick layers of wet leaves that had fused together into dark, spongy patches. The air changed too, heavier, damper, like breathing through fabric. By the time we reached the clearing where we planned to camp, the afternoon light had already begun fading into that dull gray tone that comes just before early sunset. Daniel stepped out first and stretched, his breath fogging faintly in the cold air. "This works," he said. "Perfect spot." I got out more slowly. The smell hit me immediately. Wet soil, decomposing leaves, and something metallic underneath it all. Faint but noticeable, like water that had sat too long in rusted pipes. Not horrible, just thick. The clearing was small, surrounded tightly by trees that stood closer together than I liked. Their bark looked dark and soaked, peeling in long curling strips that hung like damp ribbons. The ground sloped slightly downward into deeper forest, where the shadows looked heavier, almost layered, like darkness had weight there. And that's when I noticed something missing. Birds. There were no birds. No chirping, no wings, no distant movement overhead, only the slow creaking of branches high above, shifting against each other with long, tired groans. "Nice and quiet," Daniel said. "Exactly what we needed." I nodded, but the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt aware. We started setting up camp. Routine helped. Hammering tent stakes into cold soil, unrolling sleeping bags, gathering dry branches, stacking wood for the fire. Normal actions made everything feel manageable again. Predictable, controlled. By sunset, the fire was burning steady. Orange light flickered across the tree trunks, making their wet surfaces shine in uneven pulses. Beyond the reach of the flames, the forest became solid darkness, a wall of black that swallowed depth and distance completely. Daniel pulled out a bottle of whiskey and took a long drink before handing it to me. "To getting away from everything," he said. I took a swallow. The burn spread warm and steady through my chest. to bad decisions and questionable locations.
He laughed, and the sound traveled strangely far into the trees, stretching, thinning, until it faded into nothing. We talked for a long time. Work, old memories, random nonsense. The alcohol softened the tension, blurred the edges of unease, made the darkness feel farther away than it really was. The cold deepened slowly as night settled fully around us, but the fire held it back. At least, that's what it felt like. Then I noticed something strange. The wind stopped. Completely. The trees froze in place, branches locked, leaves unmoving. Even the smoke from the fire rose straight upward in a thin, steady column, perfectly vertical, like the air itself had turned solid.
That's weird,
I murmured.
What?
Daniel asked.
The air. It's not moving at all.
He shrugged.
Forests do that sometimes.
Maybe. The fire felt smaller than it should have. Not at first, but slowly, quietly, almost without warning. At the beginning, it had been enough. The flames snapped and cracked, sending sparks spiraling upward into branches we couldn't see. The warmth reached our hands, our faces, our legs stretched toward it. Everything outside that circle of orange light simply didn't matter. But sometime after midnight, the darkness began pressing closer. Not physically, not in any way you could measure. It just felt denser, like the forest had leaned forward while we weren't paying attention and never leaned back. Daniel had been halfway through telling another pointless story about someone from work when I noticed how sharply the air had cooled. It wasn't gradual. It dropped all at once, like something invisible had opened a door and let winter step inside. My breath turned thick and pale in front of me.
You feel that?
I asked quietly. Daniel rubbed his hands together and nodded.
Yeah, cold front, maybe.
Maybe. But cold fronts move. They pass through. They shift and breathe with the air. This cold settled and stayed. The whiskey bottle was almost empty by then. A dull warmth lived behind my eyes, but the rest of my body felt strangely alert, tense, like some deeper instinct had decided the alcohol wasn't safe to trust. The forest around us remained silent, not quiet, silent. Quiet still has life in it. Distant insects, leaves brushing, subtle random movement. Proof that the world continues when you're not watching. This wasn't that. This was the absence of motion, the absence of presence, like everything had stopped to listen. I stared past Daniel's shoulder into the trees. The firelight reached only a few feet into the forest before dissolving into thick layers of shadow. Beyond that, trunks blurred together into vertical smears of black. Then something shifted, just at the edge of visibility. Tall, narrow, slightly angled, it moved just a little, like it had adjusted its stance. Then it stopped. I blinked, leaned forward, focused harder. Nothing. Just trees.
You good?
Daniel asked.
Yeah,
I said slowly. Thought I saw something. Shadows. Probably. But shadows don't reposition themselves, like they're trying to see better. We let the fire burn lower. Too tired to gather more wood, too relaxed to care. The glow shrank inward, slowly pulling the world tighter around us. That's when we heard it. Soft at first, so faint I thought it came from inside my head. A sound drifting through the trees. Thin, fragile, a child crying. I froze instantly. Daniel's head snapped up. We listened. There it was again. A small, trembling sob, drifting from somewhere deep behind us, weak, strained, like someone trying to cry quietly and failing. It came from the forest, alone. Daniel stood slowly.
you hear that, right?
I nodded. We waited. Another sob. Longer this time. Shaking at the edges. Every rational explanation tried forming at once. Family camping nearby, A lost child, someone hurt, but no voices calling back. No movement, no urgency, just crying, isolated, repeating. Should we check? Daniel whispered. My instinct said yes, that's what normal people do. But something about the sound felt misplaced. It didn't echo properly. It didn't travel through space the way sound should. It reached us too clean, too direct, and it never changed distance. Never closer, never farther. Exactly the same every time.
No,
I said quietly. We shouldn't. Daniel frowned.
what if someone needs help?
The crying came again, sharper now, more strained. My skin prickled along my arms.
Listen carefully.
I whispered. He did. We both stood still, letting the sound reach us again. And that's when we understood. There were no breaths between the sobs, no inhale, no trembling chest, no variation in rhythm. Each cry was identical in length, identical in pitch, identical in tone. Like something replaying a recording, imperfectly spaced, but mechanically precise. Daniel's face drained of color. What the hell? The crying stopped. Instantly. No fading, no trailing sound, just cut off. Silence dropped over us like weight. Then came something new, low, wet, a long, dragging moan from somewhere to our left. Not wind, not animal, human, but W-O-N-G. It stretched too long, longer than lungs should allow, then snapped off suddenly, like something had interrupted it mid-breath. Daniel slowly turned toward the sound. Another moan followed, closer, uneven, forced, as if air struggled through a throat that didn't understand how sound worked. I grabbed my flashlight and swept the beam into the trees, branches, leaves, dark bark slick with moisture. Nothing else. Then the light passed between two narrow trunks, and something blocked it. A silhouette, still, upright, watching. I jerked the beam back. Empty space. Did you see that? I whispered. Daniel didn't answer right away. Yeah. Minutes passed. No sound, no movement. But the feeling changed. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was attention. Like something had found us, marked us, and now simply observed. We threw more wood onto the fire. Flames surged, upward, shadows leaping wildly across the clearing. That's when we noticed them. Not one silhouette, several. Standing deeper between the trees. Too dark to see clearly, too still to identify, but unmistakably shaped, positioned at different distances, partially hidden, forming a loose perimeter around the clearing. They hadn't been there before. Or maybe the fire just hadn't been bright enough. Daniel leaned close. His voice barely existed. We're not alone out here. I didn't answer, because something inside me understood something worse. Whatever stood between those trees had been watching us long before we noticed them. And now, they weren't hiding anymore. We didn't say it out loud, but neither of us slept. The fire had grown strong again, flames climbing higher, chewing through damp wood with sharp, uneven cracks that echoed farther than they should have. Every time a log shifted, we both flinched, like something had snapped a bone nearby. The light helped, but only in the way a candle helps in a basement. It showed just enough light to make you aware of how much you couldn't see. The shapes between the trees never fully disappeared. Even when the flames surged, even when we stood and aimed both flashlights straight into the forest, there were always darker vertical smears, where the darkness felt too thick, too deliberate. Sometimes they looked like tree trunks. Sometimes they didn't. Neither of us tried to prove anything anymore. We just watched. Time slowed into something heavy, shapeless. Minutes stretched. The cold deepened. The smell of wet leaves thickened as the ground released the night's moisture. Somewhere high above us, unseen branches creaked with slow tension, like old wood bending under weight that never shifted. Daniel eventually whispered, "We should leave." His voice sounded dry, scraped thin by fear. I looked toward the car. It sat about 20 yards away, barely visible beyond the firelight, its surface reflecting the glow in dull, uneven patches. The distance suddenly felt enormous. Not physically, psychologically. Like the space between us and the car was no longer empty ground, but something layered, occupied, filled with unseen paths that didn't belong to us. "If we move," I said quietly, "we lose the light." He didn't argue. He just stared into the trees, jaw tight. For a long time, nothing happened. No crying, no moaning, no visible movement. But the stillness no longer felt passive. It felt patient. Like something was letting the silence do the work, letting tension coil tighter inside our ribs until breathing itself became exhausting. Then, the smell changed. At first, it was subtle, blending into the damp forest air. But slowly, steadily, it grew sharper, sour, organic, like something that had been wet for too long, something that had softened, something beginning to come apart. Daniel noticed it at the same time I did. He covered his nose with his sleeve, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the fire. "Something's rotting," he whispered. I nodded slowly, but the smell didn't drift like a normal scent. It didn't move with air currents. It didn't fade or strengthen naturally. It simply appeared, then intensified, as if whatever produced it had stepped closer without making a sound. We both turned toward the same section of forest without speaking. Instinct pulled our attention to a narrow gap between two trees where the shadows pooled thickest. That's when we heard the breathing, not ours. Slow, uneven, wet. It came from that gap in the trees, low to the ground at first, then rising slightly, as if whatever produced it had lifted its head. A steady intake, a heavy release, with faint liquid vibration somewhere deep in the throat. Daniel's fingers tightened around his flashlight until his knuckles turned pale. The beam trembled across bark and leaves. "Show yourself," he called, voice barely steady. The breathing stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt sharper than any sound. Then something shifted in the leaves. Not a step, not movement through brush, just a subtle compression, like weight settling downward, as if something had lowered itself closer to the ground or repositioned limbs without walking. The smell thickened. I forced myself to raise my flashlight and aim directly into the gap. The beam cut through floating moisture and dust, illuminating tangled roots, dark soil, slick bark, and then reflection. Two small points of dull shine near ground level, not glowing, not bright, just faintly reflective, like wet surfaces catching light. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They simply faced us. Daniel inhaled sharply. Eyes, but they were too low, too wide apart, and angled in a way that didn't match anything standing upright. The reflections shifted slowly, not forward, but sideways, sliding behind the trunk of one tree, without sound, without disturbing a single leaf. The breathing did not return. Whatever had been watching us simply repositioned and continued watching from somewhere we couldn't see. Then something else moved behind us. Fast. Not close, but closer than anything had been before. We spun around together, flashlights sweeping wildly through the trees on the opposite side of the clearing. The beams crossed, shook, jittered, and caught movement. A tall shape passed behind a cluster of trunks about 30 feet away. Its upper half tilted forward, spine curved W-orong, arms hanging longer than they should have, shoulders narrow-angled, unnatural. It didn't run, it glided. The motion lasted less than 2 seconds, then vanished into deeper shadow. Daniel staggered backward toward the fire. No, no, no. That was a person, that had to be a person. But the way it moved replayed in my mind. No vertical bounce, no shifting weight, just continuous forward glide, like joints that didn't need to bend. From deeper in the forest, a long, distant moan. Then another, from a different direction. Then another, closer. They overlapped slightly, not synchronized, but aware of each other. The sounds rolled through the trees in uneven waves, like something trying to communicate through damaged voices. Daniel grabbed my arm. They're surrounding us. He was right. The moans formed a loose circle beyond the firelight, some distant, some nearer, some low and dragging, others thin and strained. None fully human, none fully animal, just broken attempts at sound. The forest that had been silent now felt crowded, layered with presence, pressing inward from every direction, just beyond the edge of visibility. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks upward. For a brief moment, the clearing flared bright enough to push shadows back, and that's when we saw how many silhouettes stood between the trees. Not two, not three, more. Some tall, some hunched, some thin as branches. All completely still, positioned at different depths, forming a loose perimeter around us. Watching, waiting. The smell of rot filled my lungs so strongly, I nearly gagged. My eyes watered. My hands trembled around the flashlight. Daniel whispered, barely audible, "I think they're getting closer every time we look away." I didn't want to believe him, but deep down, I already knew he was right, because the trees at the edge of the clearing no longer looked as far away as they had an hour ago. And the space between us and the forest felt smaller, like the night itself had taken a slow step forward. And it wasn't finished yet. For a long time, the silhouettes moved. They stood between the trees like stains burned into the darkness. Some leaned slightly, some looked hunched, some seemed too tall for the spaces they occupied, their upper halves vanishing into tangled branches overhead. The firelight flickered, and with every shift of brightness, their shapes rearranged just enough to make my stomach tighten. They weren't approaching, they were letting us SEE them. The smell of decay thickened until breathing felt like swallowing something soft and spoiled. My throat burned, my eyes watered. Daniel kept turning slowly in place, flashlight trembling in his grip, as if trying to count them, or prove there weren't as many as we thought. He stopped turning when the nearest silhouette moved. Just one step. Slow. Careful. Deliberate. The 8 came from directly across the fire, where the trees were packed tightest together. At first, the movement was subtle, just a shift of shadow detaching from shadow. Then something emerged far enough that the firelight touched it, and we finally saw one clearly. It was shaped like a man, but only in the loosest sense. Its limbs were too long. Not dramatically, just enough to make every proportion feel WRM. The arms hung lower than natural, bending slightly inward, like they weren't meant to support weight properly. The shoulders sloped forward, narrow, fragile looking. The chest seemed sunken, almost collapsed inward. Not sweating, just wet, like something that had never fully dried. The firelight revealed texture that made my stomach twist. The surface of its skin wasn't smooth. It looked uneven, softened, as if layers had been exposed to moisture for too long and begun separating. In some places it sagged slightly, forming loose folds that shifted when it moved. Its head tilted slowly to one side. Too far, farther than a human neck should allow. The face, I wish I could say it was monstrous in some dramatic way. Claws, fangs, distortion? It wasn't. It looked almost human. That was what made it unbearable. Its features seemed incomplete, like someone had tried to form a face from memory and gotten the details wrong. The eyes were set too deep, their surfaces cloudy, reflecting firelight like wet glass. The nose looked flattened, barely raised from the skin. The mouth, slightly open, stretched just enough to show gums that looked pale, swollen. It didn't blink. It didn't breathe. It just leaned forward, studying us the way a person might observe something fragile, something unfamiliar. Then it took another step into the clearing. Leaves didn't crunch beneath its feet. Its body swayed gently with each motion, like joints connected loosely, adjusting after the movement instead of during it. Behind it, deeper in the forest, other shapes shifted, not stepping forward, just adjusting like an audience settling closer to the edge of a stage. Daniel whispered something, but the words never fully formed. My body had locked in place. Every muscle pulled tight, but nothing responded. My mind screamed to run, to move, to do anything, but my legs refused. The thing leaned slightly toward the fire, and for the first time, it inhaled. The sound was wet, deep, pulling air through something that resisted the motion. Then it exhaled, and the smell intensified instantly, thick, rancid, overpowering, like the breath itself carried decay. Daniel snapped. He grabbed a burning branch from the fire and hurled it toward the thing. The branch struck its shoulder and fell to the ground beside it. The creature did not react, did not flinch, did not even look at the flame. It just watched Daniel. Then its head tilted the other direction, slowly, curiously, and its mouth stretched wider. Not a smile, just opening, wider and wider, until the skin at the corners pulled tight pale, strained. That was when Daniel screamed, and everything exploded into motion. They moved all at once, not charging, not rushing blindly. They advanced with terrible coordination, spreading outward, cutting angles, closing distance with precise, silent steps, like they had done this before. Daniel grabbed my arm and yanked me toward the car. My body finally responded. We ran, stumbling over roots, slipping on wet leaves, lungs burning from cold air and terror. Behind us, movement surged through the forest, not crashing, not chaotic, controlled, measured, hurting. I heard breathing everywhere, wet inhalations, dragging exhalations, different distances, different directions. They weren't chasing randomly. They were guiding us somewhere. The Ek came into view, 20 feet, 15, 10. Daniel reached it first, fumbling for the handle, shouting for me to hurry. That's when something dropped from the trees. Not fell, dropped with intention. It landed between us and the driver's side door with a heavy, soft impact. Limbs bent too deeply, absorbing the motion, then straightened slowly. Another one, closer, lower, its head tilted toward Daniel, and then it lunged. Not fast, not sudden, but unstoppable. Its arms wrapped around him with horrifying precision, long fingers pressing into his shoulders, his ribs, his neck. Daniel screamed, twisting violently, kicking, striking, but the creature held him with calm, mechanical strength. I grabbed his arm, pulled, screamed his name. His skin felt hot, alive, real, and the thing holding him felt cold, dense, unmoving, like gripping something that had never known warmth. More shapes emerged from the darkness behind it. They didn't rush us. They gathered, waiting, watching. Daniel looked straight into my eyes. I will never forget that look. Not panic, not confusion, understanding. He knew I couldn't pull him free. He knew what was happening. His mouth opened, to speak. But the creature shifted its grip, tightening around his chest, and the sound that came out of him turned into a wet, choking gasp. I let go. I ran. I don't remember reaching the road. I don't remember leaving the trees. I only remember running until the forest sounds vanished, until my lungs tore, until my legs collapsed beneath me on cold pavement. The police searched for 3 days. Drones, dogs, volunteers, grid sweeps. They found our campsite. They found footprints, many of them. None matched known patterns of human movement. Too narrow, too elongated. Pressure distribution, wrong. They found drag marks that stopped abruptly, as if weight had simply lifted off the ground. They did not find Daniel. No blood, no clothing, no signs of struggle beyond disturbed leaves and compressed soil. Nothing. They asked me the same questions, over and over. What did they look like? How many were there? Did they speak? Did they attack you? Why did they take him and not you? I had no answers they could use. Only things they couldn't file, couldn't measure, couldn't categorize. Eventually, the search ended. Officially, Daniel disappeared during a camping trip. Case unresolved. I tried to return to normal life. Work, sleep, noise, light. But silence feels different now. Any stillness that lasts too long makes my chest tighten, because I know what real silence means. It means something is listening. 3 weeks after the investigation ended, I noticed the smell. Faint at first, damp, sour, organic, like something that had been wet for too long. It appears sometimes at night, always when the air is completely still, always when no whine moves, no sound drifts, no distant noise breaks the quiet, just before sleep, just before dreams take over. Sometimes I hear breathing, not loud, not near, just present, measured, patient. Once, I woke up convinced someone had walked across my bedroom floor, slow, careful, deliberate, stopping beside the bed. I didn't open my eyes because I knew something terrible, something I cannot explain, something I cannot prove, something I cannot stop thinking about. When they surrounded us that night, they never tried to hide. They let us SE-aim. They watched how we reacted. They learned how we moved, how we feared, how we chose. And when they took Daniel, they didn't rush away. They didn't panic. They simply left, like they had finished collecting something they needed. Sometimes I wonder if they were only observing, studying, understanding. And sometimes, when the smell returns, when the air stops moving, when the silence presses too tightly against my ears, I wonder something worse. What if they didn't take Daniel because they were hunting? What if they took him because they were learning how to become us? And what if they're still practicing?
What do you think of this story? I just want to say, in conclusion, that everyone has the right to dream about something at least once in their life. Until next time, listener on the other side of the screen.